Live from a bunker in the heart of the Ozarks, a podcast that tries very hard not just to be men talking. It's Sif Pop. Welcome to Sif Pop Weekly, streaming live most Saturday mornings or available to download later in your podcast feed, unless, of course, you're a patron.
Patrons get perks.
Patrons get those perks.
If you want to be happy for the rest of your life.
I'm your host, Aaron Dicer, and he thinks food tastes funny on a plastic fork. It's Andrew Ormsby, ladies and gentlemen.
Ahoy!
Each week we'll chat about movies, TV, and whatever else from the pop culture universe is on our minds. And please welcome our guest this week, new to the show. She refused to podcast unless you're willing to connect your braids with hers. It's Courtney Lanning.
That was an official demand, by the way. I gotta have that direct connection.
Man, I think Courtney and I are gonna have some issue with that.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard to connect braids with Andrew.
I think I got down here.
Just got to get that beard long enough.
Yeah,
and we should be good to go.
I'll give you time. I'm a patient woman.
Oh,
okay.
Thank you.
Well, you're gonna have to be very patient for anything up here because it's gone.
It's not just the razor that keeps it from growing. Courtney, welcome to Sif Pop.
Hey.
It has been. I was trying to look when the last time we debuted a Sif Pop guest was, and it has been a long time. So welcome to your debut episode of Sif Pop. We're glad to have you on. Courtney is a film critic from the Maine area of this country, the Great Northeast. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you fall in love with movies? How long have you been a movie person? You just kind of introduce us to yourself, Courtney.
So I do live in Maine at the moment, and I love it. Although up here, unless you've been in Maine for 16 generations, they say you're from away. And it doesn't matter how long you've been here, like you said.
Yes.
Unless you have 16 generations or came across on the Mayflower, you are from away. And I actually am from Arkansas, still write for an Arkansas newspaper. It's where most of my reviews pop up.
That's near us.
That's right, down there in the Ozarks. All of my reviews show up there in the newspaper, and I guess I've been in love with movies since I watched them as a kid. You and I and Aaron and Andrew, we were talking about things that I really focus in on during award season in the pre-show, and animation is really my go-to as far as favorite medium for films and storytelling.
What is your, you don't have to even narrow it down to one, but what is one of your favorite animated movies of all time as an animated film lover? I am also an animated film lover, as you might be able to tell from the knickknacks behind me. But what is your favorite animated film or one of them of all time?
You know, I really do love Hayao Miyazaki's work.
Nice.
And I think that one of my favorite movies of all time is probably Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind.
I think Courtney and I are going to get along just fine.
Yeah. Despite the braid connection that we'll still work on.
Yeah.
Well, we are glad to have you on the show, Courtney. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to, of course, have a couple of reviews that we're doing. We're going to talk about the Fabelmans and Women Talking. And then we'll also have the best ever Steven Spielberg movies. Which, again, this is one of those things, Andrew, where I look back through our history and I'm like, have we not done best ever Spielberg movies before? And I couldn't find any record of it. So I was like, well, let's do it. Let's get it over with. So we'll be doing the best ever Steven Spielberg movies. And, of course, we'll do some buried treasure as well. But if you guys are ready, we're going to review some movies. Let's kick it off, speaking of Spielberg, with his latest. Let's talk a little bit about The Fabelmans. A coming-of-age story about a young man's discovery of a shattering family secret and an exploration of the power of movies to help us see the truth about each other and ourselves. As mentioned, this is Steven Spielberg's latest. Gabriel LaBelle as Sammy Fabelman for most of the movie, although there's a younger version than him as well. Julia Butters hanging out here as one of the sisters. Michelle Williams, Paul Dano playing the parents. Seth Rogen playing family friend Benny. Judd Hirsch coming in for a cup of coffee, just bursts onto the screen for a little bit and has some fun, as well as a cameo, a great cameo I will not spoil that happens towards the end of the movie. Lots of great people in this. Of course, we know Spielberg is a very talented director, but what did you guys think? Did you like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or it was just okay? Andrew, where do you put it?
I didn't like it.
He's in the didn't like
I know.
it camp.
I'm the only one in the world who doesn't like this movie.
Shun him. Him. He didn't like a Spielberg movie. Courtney, did you like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or it was just okay?
I loved it, but
loved it. Nice.
That's honestly the smaller camp. Talking with some of my other critics at the newspaper, and they all were in Andrew's camp. They thought it was dishonest.
Interesting. Well, let's get into it. Liked it, loved it, disliked it, hated it. It was just okay for me. I'm going to go on the low side of loved it. Bordering on liked it. I think this is a great movie. There are some flaws here for me that will keep it really kind of from competing for my best movie of the year, although it will be one of my favorites of the year. I think there's a lot to like here. Courtney, you seem to love it the most, so why don't you start us off? What are some of your general thoughts on The Fabelmans?
So, first off, I think it's hilarious that we get 2 Paul Dano movies this year, and one is him playing the Riddler, and the other is him playing Steven Spielberg's father.
A very mild-mannered dad. Yeah.
Right. Just a very calm, simple father.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I think the smaller performances in The Fabelmans end up being my favorite. Judd Hirsch's on-screen scenes were just where I was really wowed.
He's so good. He just comes in and owns the movie for a moment. It's amazing.
He does. And, he comes in, he has a great line about, he's a lion tamer. Steven Spielberg asks him, what sticking your head in a lion's mouth, is that art? And he goes, no, that's not art. Keeping the lion from eating you when your head is in the mouth, that's art.
Yeah.
And I won't spoil the final cameo at the end, but my jaw was on the floor for that last scene.
Yeah. Those are a couple really fun moments of the movie. I think for me, I had a really good time with this movie, primarily because it says so much about what it means to be a creative person in many different ways. It says it through some negative way, like it shows some of the negative consequences of having kind of that creative brain. It shows also some of the incredible genius and positive consequences of having a creative brain. I've been told that I am a fairly balanced left brain, right brain kind of person. Like I love organization, I love order, I love, spreadsheets and logic and all those things, but I also love to create. I love to perform, so there are these two sides of me that kind of battle with each other. And what I loved about this movie, one of my primary things, is I felt that in Spielberg. Like I think he has kind of that same thing where it's like, this logical, engineerish type part of his brain comes from things that his dad taught him and showed him about how machines work. And his dad's always talking about like the details of how things work, which, activates this part of his brain. And then his mom is just like, dance and sing and be creative and let go. And it doesn't all have to make sense. And so then there's that, side, and they were kind of these extremes in a lot of Spielberg's genius, it seems, may come from that kind of balance. At least that's what I think he's saying in this movie. So that I think that's why at the end of the day, I come down in the loved it camp, is because that's so meaningful to me. Like this idea of how do you become a creative person and also balance that with, you know, a desire for order and a desire for logic and all those kind of things. And again, that's not to insinuate that either side, quote unquote, is a negative way to live your life. Just for me, I've always struggled with that tension in finding that balance. So I found the movie moving in that way. Andrew, what are some of your thoughts?
Whenever you're doing a period piece, you have to make the world feel real. And I think that this time period felt incredibly real. That the environments, the people's mannerisms, it truly felt like I was watching a film from the 50s and 60s, not one just set in the 50s and 60s. So I think that was brilliant. And speaking of mannerisms and performances, I think Gabriel LaBelle is quite remarkable as a young man whose love for filmmaking collides with his family life. The performance was genuine and believable, probably the most believable in the film, honestly.
Let's talk about some more of the performances. Since you're kind of leading us down that way, there's been a real mixed reaction to Michelle Williams in this movie. I have heard extremes on both sides. People calling for nominations for an amazing performance. People saying that it didn't work for them. Courtney, I'm interested to start with you. How did you feel about Michelle Williams in this movie?
I feel like her performance, I feel like she gave it her all. I don't think you can say she walked in, she phoned it in, she was doing...
Oh, no, she's doing something. She's definitely doing something in this movie, yeah.
I think she gave it everything she could. But when I look at my favorite parts of this movie, I don't think she falls into that side. I don't think she did a bad job. There was just something a little off kilter about it. It didn't quite fit into place for me, and I honestly couldn't tell you why.
Andrew, some thoughts?
She was pushing. She was really pushing the performance, and
let's say Spielberg was really pushing the performance through
For
her,
her?
because I often get a little uncomfortable giving the entirety of a performance to the actors themselves, because the directors make so many choices about what makes it to the screen, those kind of things. For all we know, there are different subtler takes from what she's doing, and Spielberg was like, no, this is what I want. So it is definitely a balanced thing, but there does seem to be a lot of effort in it, for sure.
Yeah. Well, regardless, either way, the performance that I saw on screen did not feel genuine. It felt like somebody was trying way too hard to convey certain aspects and emotions of their life. Not only that, I just don't like that character. Like, I know that it's coming from a real place, but I felt like she was manipulative and inconsiderate, but I think the movie wants us to pity this character. And if that's the movie's intention, for me, it failed.
I think the movie wants us to see her through her son's eyes, in this case, who is also the director, right? Like, I think the intention is for Spielberg to go, here are all the flaws of my mom, but see it how I see it and find empathy for her even through those flaws. So I think that's what you're picking up on, is the intention of empathy for this character, and, you know, her ability to navigate her own feelings, emotions, mental health, all of that.
Well, I'm glad you brought up mental health, because I feel like that obviously has to be at least a factor in, I like this character, I don't like this character, what have you. It never comes right out and says, she's suffering from blank. She is diagnosed with blank, but you watch this as a character and you can tell this is somebody who is clearly struggling. I don't know if it's bipolar disorder or if she might have, you know, onset Alzheimer's or something, but she's clearly not in a healthy mind space. And I feel like that has to be at least part of the lens that we look at her character through.
Yeah. I think that's what the movie's attempting to do, is to bring empathy to that and just say, you know, humanity can look ugly, but it's still humanity. I thought the scenes between Gabrielle and Michelle were some of her best scenes. Like the scenes where they are wrestling with his discovery or whatever, I thought was some of the best stuff from her in this movie. But overall, I'm with you, Andrew. I feel like her performance the performance that was on screen didn't quite work for me overall.
Yeah.
So it was one of my negatives for sure. Other thoughts, Courtney? What else?
I feel like Seth Rogen kind of came out of nowhere. I guess I just didn't expect Seth Rogen to be in this movie. I didn't look at the cast list before I went into it. I tried to go in blinds. And so when I saw, oh hey, that's Seth Rogen, my brain was like, wait, that's not Sean Astin? Hang on. I had to kind of
he
do a double
does
take.
look like Sean Astin.
Right, at least in this picture, because they make him look so mild-mannered. And I was just thinking, oh, that's Seth Rogen. Okay, and he did a great job for the best friend that comes in and does what he does. And there's a lot of moral complexities with his actions and performances as well. Especially, I think his best scene is just trying to buy the camera for Steven there at the camera shop. I don't know if that's much of a spoiler, but just there's guilt in this purchase, but there's also I care about your mother and she likes your movies, so please take this and keep making movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Andrew, other thoughts?
I think that Spielberg has an almost deity-esque status in the entertainment world now, that just the simple fact that I'm getting to watch a movie about where his brilliance and love and passion comes from feels like a privilege. Like it's a privilege to sit down and watch how he thinks he became who he is. Not some documentary looking back that's not personal or anything. I think that this retelling of his young adulthood, and yes, some of it can be, exaggerated or elevated or anything like that, or, cast in a certain light, because you can't trust really an autobiography to be totally genuine. But sitting down and watching it, there were parts of this. My favorite scene in this entire movie is all the scenes where he's actually making movies and stuff, and especially where there's a scene where he's trying to convince an actor to convey emotion while looking over something, and he tries to make a person. That's my favorite scene from the entire movie, because I'm like, this is Spielberg, like this,
like in some of the technical tricks, like the pinprick in the film for the gunshot, like genius.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's the movie that I loved. Everything else, that's where it kind of fell apart. But I'll get to it whenever we get to negatives.
That's fine. I agree, and I was going to bring it up if nobody else did. I think the filmmaking stuff in this is really fun to watch. How he created the explosions with the, stepping on the boards and just stuff like that is always fun for me. I also think when you talk about like the privilege of getting to understand Steven Spielberg's own narrative about his career, like this, you're right. Our own narratives are not to be trusted. We are all human. We all have biases. We all tend to see ourselves as the protagonists of our own story. No, I shouldn't say nobody, but very few of us walk around thinking, I'm the villain. So, we create narratives that excuse our negative parts and emphasize our good parts. That's just what we do as human beings, right? So to see Spielberg's version of his narrative, of his life and who he is was really interesting to me. And the thing I took most away from it, one of the other things I really liked about this movie, is it really shows that the seed of his creative genius is about control. It really is about this thing where the things that frighten him in life, the things that seem out of control for him in life, he can control them on film. He can make them do what he wants them to do. He can make them be what he wants them to be. So, for instance, this isn't giving a lot away because this is kind of the setup of the whole thing. But for instance, his first movie experience being, or maybe not his first, but one of his biggest movie experiences being, I think it's an old movie called The Greatest Show on Earth. I think is what the movie was. There's a big train wreck in it. And then his mind, I thought it was a really brilliant moment where we're used to seeing the child wake up screaming because they've had a nightmare about this thing they saw in a movie. And we hear him screaming, but he's not having a nightmare. He's having a revelation that he wants to create this. He's like, I know what I want for Christmas or Hanukkah or, you know, my birthday or whatever it was. And he is able to then recreate this so he can take control of it and understand it.
It's all about control.
And the control seed is really interesting when you start to think about this movie, because he is taking control of his own upbringing in the fear, in the messiness, in the, you know, whatever the chaos of whatever it means to grow up in that family or any family. And he's going, now I can control it when I make the Fabelmans. So the movie itself is this grand example of the theme of what the movie is doing. It's kind of meta in that way. There's a little bit of meta-ness here about his own desire to control what he wants to say about his upbringing and his parents and himself. And I don't know, I thought that was really beautiful. I found that really affecting. So that was another big positive for me, was just thinking of, you know, just kind of that insight into himself that was aware of what he is even doing as he creates this movie. And as you look back at Spielberg's movies, you can see a lot of like his idea of controlling the narrative. And you see it in other filmmakers as well. Like I think of Quentin Tarantino, like the idea to an extreme, how he takes, you know, terrible things and wants to control the narrative in a way different. You know, like filmmakers use film as this creative resource to tell a story the way they wanted it to happen or the way they see it. And man, I love that stuff, and I think the movie handles all that stuff really, really well. Andrew, do you have some negatives you want to go ahead and get into, because you didn't like this movie? You didn't like it.
This is my biggest issue with this movie right here, is I found this film to be incredibly disjointed, jumping from one aspect of Sam, who we've been calling him Steven this entire time, but the character's name is actually Sam. It jumps from one aspect of his life to another with very little flow. It's like Spielberg was grabbing the most important and informative moments from his childhood, and to show the audience what he felt was vital to him growing up. But you have to remember, from a narrative flow from one element of Sam's life to the next, it has to be smooth and even, like they were from the same movie. And I don't think they were from the same movie. Like there were some sequences, especially that third act where he's in high school, where all of those sequences were from a completely different movie. For me,
I totally disagree. I totally disagree with this point. I think this movie is so consistent tone-wise, but go ahead.
For me, I would have preferred if the movie focused solely on either his love for movie and his relationship with his family, and not bring any of these outside elements to it. Like that entire third act, there's a sequence, I'll just say, that takes place in the hallway of a high school between 2 and then 3 characters.
It's so good.
I hated it, but it's so much
key to the movie. Like this, I think it all fits. I think it all goes together in a way that, again, is creating this idea of narrative control. Like that's what he's doing in that scene with these characters in his life. Like it is even almost a literal early example of him taking his life and then creating what he wants it to be on screen, and how that impacts the other people around him. And I just to disagree. It's okay. It's just a hard disagree. I think it's actually one of the positives. It really is,
because
break the tie, Courtney. Who's right? Who's right, Courtney?
You know, I do feel like there are parts that feel a little disjointed, but again, I kind of feel like that gets back to the overall tone and message of the film. I'm sure when Steven looks back on his life as a kid, it probably feels disjointed when he's dealing with a mother who has mental health issues and 2 parents who are divorcing and keeping the secret of an affair on top of anti-Semitism. I'm sure that feels like a very disjointed childhood. So if it's intentional, maybe he imprinted that on the movie himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess my issue is that, yes, I can understand that having a cluttered life as a child with so many things going on can feel disjointed, but I also think that for a movie to tell a good story, it has to give us some element to focus on. You know, like whether it be, if the movie wanted to be Steven Spielberg kind of, playing with movies in the background, but it's really about his family and his family element and how that could have shaped him. But the movie tried to say, this is so important, really focus on that, but also don't forget to focus on this, because this is also really important. It didn't feel like the movie gave enough, well, not grace, but time to each thing that it told me was so important.
Well, because at the center of all of it, tying all of it together, is film. At the center of every single one of those stories is how he uses film to control it. Like this is a movie. Even our final shot. This is again an old thing I go back to that I learned in an early storytelling class. But the very last thing you see in a movie is the thing the director wanted you to remember, wanted you to think about, you to leave the theater thinking about. And the very last scene of this movie is about controlling the narrative. The very last scene of this movie is about how film can make you feel. I think that's the whole point of the movie. I don't think the point of the movie is about his family. I don't think it's about anti-Semitism. I don't think it's about bullying. I don't think it's about mental health. I think it's about how Steven Spielberg, aka Sammy Fabelman, yes, that's
Sam.
right. Well,
I'm doing a bit from the movie, Aaron. Come on.
Yeah.
Okay. But I was going to say, Fable is right there in the name. Like, he knows he's telling this fable story
man.
of his own life. Uses movies to be able to see his life differently and to control the things that scare him and frighten him. I think that is the through line. I think that is the point of the movie that maybe you were looking for. But if you had a disjointed experience, you had a disjointed experience. That's I totally get it.
Yeah.
So. Courtney, what about negatives from you? Is there anything about the movie that you walk away going, even though I love this didn't quite work for me?
I feel like the biggest negative impacts to the story for me, Sam felt like a fleshed out character. His mother and father felt like fleshed out characters, whether you thought their performances were great or not. They feel like whole characters.
Yeah.
I don't feel like Steven's sisters were even there.
No, that's a great negative to bring up.
And if this is going to be a film about how family and the chaos it brings impacts his perspective on filmmaking growing up, then I think you got to at least dedicate another 5 to 10 minutes to these family relationships. Like, there was a scene where he's talking at the table about one of his movies, and one of his sisters says, "What about roles for women? When are you going to cast a girl in your movie?" And I thought, okay, cool.
How ironic.
Maybe this is going to be a relationship that he delves into with the sister about, maybe I should be casting more women in my movies, or just women at all, because it's all men in his shots. But it just, boom, bypasses. There's another scene right after the divorce is announced where he's up editing a movie on his little editor for his high school. And one of the sisters comes in, and they have a little fight about how can you be so calm through all of this, and you're selfish, and yada, yada, yada. And then he says, "Hey, before you go, can you watch this movie with me before I show it to my high school?" And I thought, okay, cool. Maybe we're going to get a little bit more of a tender development here. Maybe a little bit more of these are my sisters. And we just don't. The movie denied us those crucial aspects of his family.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand the divorce is a front and center part of the narrative, but dude had 3 sisters, and we should have had at least a little more time dedicated to them and their impact on his life. When I was reading about how Steven wanted to make the movie initially, I feel like I remember reading that he initially conceived the project back in the 90s. And he was talking to, of all people, his sister about how the movie should be made and getting the idea off the ground. And, for that to be a part of the founding details, we don't get very much relationship with his sisters at all in this movie.
Yeah, I felt the same way, and I felt the irony of her asking about women's roles in a role that isn't given a lot of credence or due. Not to say the movie doesn't have a great women's role. Certainly Michelle Williams is given plenty to do front and center in this movie. But just interesting coming from that character. Was it even Julia Butters who said that? Because I'm just like, you've got Julia Butters, like she's amazing, like use her, she's incredible.
I think that was her character. Yeah.
So what's interesting about it, and I wonder if this is the case, is I wonder if it's because his sisters weren't ever something that was an obstacle in his life that he had to figure out. Like, this is a movie about his obstacles and how, again, he controlled them through film. And his sisters were, at least according to this movie, felt just to be kind of a positive influence on his life right from the beginning. Like, they seem to have, when they pop in, they're always telling him the right thing and helping him, shift his thinking to where it should be as opposed to where it is. They seem very constructive. They're just so underdeveloped. They're just not. There isn't that key moment with them that brings any kind of thematic, resolution to their role in what's going on here. So, yeah.
I couldn't tell you any of their names, right? We all remember
Right.
Sam.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember any of his sisters' names, and the movie it didn't seem like the movie took the time to really give them much of an identity so that you could remember who they were.
Yep. Final thoughts. Andrew, what's your one last thing about the Fabelmans?
I guess technically the post-credit scene is every single film Steven Spielberg made, right?
Sure, but it's not in this movie.
But it's not in this movie.
Yeah. Courtney, any final thoughts?
I am, when I look at, and I'm sure you do this too, as we get to December at the end of the year, you start putting together your top 10 list. I think these were the top 10 movies I enjoyed most. I feel like Fabelmans is probably going to go in my top 10s. When I finished watching the movie, I came in and sat down on the couch next to my wife and just kind of stared off into space for 2 or 3 minutes, and she was like, "You good?" And I was like, "Yeah, it was just a really good movie." And I think that's probably what Steven wants people to be doing after they watch the film, right?
Sure, absolutely. My one last thing is put Judd Hirsch in everything.
Seriously,
just give him all the jobs.
I want to watch Independence Day again now because
right.
Yeah.
Did you know that's actually the role that Steven Spielberg told Judd Hirsch that he watched that he wanted him for this role?
Really?
It was Independence Day. Yeah, he had
That's
like a movie for
fantastic.
each of them where he was like, "This is the movie that sold me on you for this role." And for Judd Hirsch, it was Independence Day.
That's fantastic. I love
But
that so
not
much.
not the sequel, just the original.
No,
not
just the
the
original.
sequel.
Just the original.
Can you imagine? If Steven Spielberg's talking to Judd Hirsch? The movie that made me think I need you was Independence Day 2.
Yeah, Resurgence. All right, there you go. That is the Fabelmans. It is in theaters now. If you want to check it out, let's move on to talk a little bit about women talking. A group of women in an isolated religious colony struggle to reconcile their faith with a string of sexual assaults committed by the colony's men. We can start there. Certainly, there are different trigger warnings that deserve even elevated mention. Sexual assault is one of them. So many people have dealt with this terrible and traumatic issue that it's worth mentioning right off the bat that this movie does not shy away from the central role of sexual assault in the plot. So I wanted to let you guys know that. It stars Claire Foy, Jessie Buckley, Rooney Mara, Francis McDormand, Ben Whishaw as one of the men who's talking, the only man talking in this movie. Judith Ivey, Shayla Brown, Michelle McLeod. What did you guys think of Women Talking? Did you like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or it was just okay? I should also mention Sarah Polley directing Women Talking. Courtney, we'll start with you this time. What category would you put it in? Like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or it was just okay?
I liked it. I don't think there's anything keeping me from loving it. It's such a brutal film. When we talk about going from the Fabelmans to this,
Sure.
It's just such a brutal movie that I have a hard time going. I loved it. It's I liked it.
Feel
It's
good movie of the year.
No.
Aaron?
I love this movie. This will compete for my best of the year. There are two ways to make sure that you lock in Aaron loving your movie. One of them is to deal with themes of religion, choice, and cult and those kind of things. I think exploring those things is so important. And the other is to have a group of human beings just give consecutive amazing performances. That's going to do it for me every time. Like, people in a room performing their butts off in astonishing ways. Like, there's so much I love about this movie. Andrew, what category are you in?
Aaron, I've reviewed thousands of movies over my life.
Oh, we're getting a speech.
Yes. So when I tell you that I've only given 33 movies a perfect 10 out of 10, I want you to know that means something.
Okay.
There are now 34 movies.
This movie was 1 out of 10. Oh, no. Okay. 34 movies are now 10 out of... That's amazing, man. Wow. Definitely be competing for your best of the year then.
Yeah. You know what's funny? It's the second movie this year that I've given a perfect 10 out of 10 to. It's wild that it's happened twice in the same year. So that's why in the pre-show, whenever I was talking about how great 2022 was for movies, it really, really was. This movie... Oh my God.
Well, you get to start then. As much as I love this movie, sounds like you loved it more. So go for it. Just like gush all over the movie, man.
Well, I'm going to be talking a lot about the themes that you brought up, the theological themes and stuff. But before I get to that, I want to talk about how this film centers around a group of women who are debating what to do over the most truly vile and horrible situation they could find themselves in. And the group age ranges from, prepubescent to the very senior. And what I found most beautiful is that since this plight affected them all, each of their opinions mattered. Every single person, even though the issue at hand is worse than anything I could ever imagine happening, they discuss it with great restraint and grace and respect for one another. It was truly nothing short of saintly. And I'm trying not to be hyperbolic here, but and I'm also trying not to get emotional when I talk about this movie because it wrecked me hard. They also say nothing that's just well-balanced dialogue is what it is. Even though you have big name actors in this, Frances McDormand and many others, no one feels more important than another person in this film.
Yeah, I agree.
Because the movie knows that the story is bigger than one person. It's a huge group of people that's in pain. So it's the group having a voice, and I love that.
You mentioned something that I'll jump off of just briefly, which is that the movie presents, I'm going to say democracy, just as a concept at its best, right? Like we are so used to currently in our current, at least United States of America culture, seeing democracy at its worst. We're seeing polarization. We're seeing, yelling at each other, hatred, all of those things is democracy at its worst. This movie dares to say, if you get people in a room that believe differently about something, you can have a constructive conversation. And that is such a needed and powerful message to have in a culture where more and more of us are going, I just don't even want to talk to people who don't believe like I do. Like, it's just like, what do I have to say to them? And it's just, for me, it's a beautiful thing to see, because it also in many ways combats this idea of, or maybe emphasizes the idea that part of the problem is that we don't have to reconcile with our conversations with each other because we're having them outside of each other. We're having them on social media. We're having them completely separate from the idea of each other as human beings, instead of in a barn looking at the other person and just actually having to say the things we mean out loud to another human being and to be able to hear their response. Like, that kind of stuff is so important right now that I agree. It's part of the elevation for my love for this movie, is the idea of what it means to have critical conversation with each other about the most traumatic things in our lives, and to be able to disagree, and what it looks like to disagree in love, what it looks like to disagree in pain. But all that stuff, I agree with you, Andrew, was really powerful in this movie. Courtney, what are some of the things you liked about this movie?
I always appreciate how when you have a film with a very limited setting and you can still make it one of the most interesting movies of the year, I feel like that is true talent. Because when you're not relying on a backdrop, when you're not relying on interesting settings, I mean, when you look at movies that are coming out now that are like, Venice and New York and all these exciting places, and they rely on settings to be a key factor in the movie. But here, like you mentioned, these are just people talking in a barn for the majority of the film. And when they're not in the barn, they might be in a field of hay. And when they're not in a field of hay, they might be at the dinner table. But this is mostly just about a group of women talking in a barn. And
We
it's
never leave the
still
compound. The
No.
entire movie, we never
Yeah.
leave the compound. Yeah.
not at all.
It's very stage-like, like it's adapted from a stage play or something.
But it feels so cinematic. This is such a
Yeah.
hard thing to pull off, to be that much like a stage play, but also feel so much like a movie. I'm on record as knocking movies down for not being able to do this. I think most famously so, Fences, I think, was the Denzel movie.
Yeah.
I love the performances in Fences. I think Fences is an amazing story. I think it feels like a stage play. It doesn't feel like a movie to me. This feels like a movie to me, even though it could be done on stage. So I think that's worth mentioning. Courtney, continue.
And when you don't have vibrant settings and backdrops to rely on to raise your movie, it just puts that much more work onto the actors who are on the screen. That much more weight is on their burden to translate this experience and story for us. And they do so well. I mean, everybody from Rooney Mara, Judith Ivey. I mean, there's not a bad performance in the movie at all.
Judith Ivey is so good in this movie. Oh, yeah, I'm with you.
You know, we're talking about where you recognize an actor from. You talk about, Steven Spielberg for The Fabelmans. He picked Judd Hirsch after watching Independence Day for this role. And, I kept watching these characters, and I'm picking where I've seen different ones before. And when I got to Sheila McCarthy, I'm like, she looks so familiar, and I just couldn't picture it. And then it came to me all at once. Oh, this is the librarian from The Day After Tomorrow. And
Yep.
it's just always when you recognize somebody who's in more of an artsy film, but you recognize their role from like more of a big
Popcorn
popcorn
flick,
junky action flick. And she was one of my favorite characters in the whole story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny because you mentioned Judith Ivey, and my instant reaction was, oh, she's so good. Then you mentioned Sheila McCarthy, and I was like, oh, she's so good. It's like you could mention any of these humans, and I would just be like, oh my goodness, that performance! Like they are all killing it in this movie. There's not a bad performance here. There are some more subtler performances and more off-screen performances. Frances McDormand isn't in this movie a ton, but when she is, she's incredible. And playing a very central role to what we're supposed to be learning and what we're supposed to be feeling. And every single performance is one of my favorite performances of the year. So yeah.
Well, and I feel like when you talk about the subject matter they're dealing with, an oppressive, religious, theological setting, and this weight that is over them because of their faith, and in some cases here, a credit to how good the actors do, a salvation that they find still within their faith, despite the fact that it is what is oppressing them. Obviously, being in Maine now, a lot of my conversation focuses on Stephen King.
Don't want to go down that road.
No, but when you talk about tropes in Stephen King's writings and movies that are adapted from his writings, a lot of the negatives that come out are people go, oh, well, he uses the church as such a blunt instrument. It's a blunt instrument. Oh, there's always got to be a crazy religious fundamentalist. And I feel like this film does the opposite of that. It takes these negative religious experiences that these women are going through, and it deals with it in such a experiential way, so that everybody watching the movie comes away going, "Oh, that's what they're going through. This is a real thing, rather than a caricature of religion or a blunt instrument church."
Man, it's another part of this movie that rockets it to the top for me, is the way that it handles faith in this movie is so beautiful, because it doesn't make faith the villain. It makes fundamentalism and the idea of manipulation of faith the villain, right? And it makes these men the villain more than anything. And it's interesting to me that it's willing to be that nuanced, to be able to say that for many of these women, their faith is still strong. Even amidst the trauma of what has seemingly come from their faith, they find a way to disassociate what they believe from how someone else has used their beliefs to create trauma for them. And that, as a person of faith, like that is something for me that I think I've had to wrestle with my whole life, is this idea of what are my personal beliefs and how do they impact my ability to see other human beings? How do they impact what has come from a cooperative mass delusion, and what has come from a genuine desire to understand the beauty of the world and where love comes from and what faith means to me, and to wrestle with my own faith, and to see these women under more extreme circumstances that I have any inkling of ever experiencing, wrestle with that same thing and still come to some of the same conclusions that I've had to come to in my own life is, man, it was really powerful for me. And I just appreciated so much the writer, director, performers being able to bring that to life in a real way. So I'm glad you brought it up, because it was a big part of the movie for me as well. Andrew, what are some of your other thoughts?
Well, I'm going to build off what you guys just said. I love how this movie has the ability to let the audience work. Like, the audience doesn't just sit back in this one. This one, the audience is kind of involved, because even though this movie is about sexual assault, it never shows you anything. It lets the audience imagination work through what is happening in the whole film, and every time our imagination will automatically go to the absolute worst scenario, and we're probably correct. And that's the thing. Yet having all of that, while the discourse between this group about what to do next is going on, you're in awe of their ability to discuss the theological ramifications for everyone. And it makes the audience aware of how faith and religion can be used as a foundation for strength and love, but also faith can be used as a weapon to subjugate people. And I love how this movie is not afraid to have that conversation civilly. You would think that, I think we've said this before, and sorry if I'm just rehashing things we've already said, but their ability to have a civil discourse over something so extreme is something that is unheard of in modern society. Everybody's is shouting over each other, but they respect each other too much to do that. I mean, yes, there's scenes where passion does, take root, and you can definitely see it flare up in people, but it's quiet, or it's quick to recede and to move forward. I also like the fact that this movie, it has, it left me with questions about certain characters, particularly the Ben Whishaw character. I have several theories on that character now after watching this movie, and I like that it's a movie that makes me continuously think about it after it's done.
There's some things done with the Ben Whishaw character, and I believe the Rooney Mara character, that was the only point in this movie where I was like, I'm trying to connect the dots to the overall what this movie is doing to what it's doing with these two characters, and I think I got there. But if there's a part where I had to struggle the most, it was probably with what it's doing with them.
I think he was the one. And that's what my big theory is.
I don't know what you mean by that.
He was the one, and now everything he's doing is out of guilt and remorse.
Oh, I didn't pick up on that at all, but
we'll have to have that conversation after, just to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah. I do want to push back on a couple of things you said, not in a major way, but just to clarify. One, you mentioned we don't see anything. I do want to again state that we do see some things that are very traumatic. I think we do see intruders, so we do know for a fact that there were people in the room. I know you're saying we don't see the graphicness of the act of what they're doing, but we do see the graphicness of the after effects of what they have done, and I think that's fair. That should be clarified. That's worth clarifying at least, and worth mentioning. And the other thing I would push back on is the idea that people aren't having these conversations in the modern world. I think it's just that we don't see it. I think they're happening under, behind closed doors and under, in family rooms, in maybe meeting rooms, but we're not seeing it in public. We're not seeing it in public forums like social media and those
That's what I'm.
of places. Yeah. So again, just a clarification that, we know there are human beings that are able to disagree amicably and to have these conversations and to have terrible, horrible, powerful conversations with each other. But because all we see is this idea of what's in the public forum, it becomes, very politicized very quickly and very difficult to see it in our modern life. So those would just be a couple clarification pushbacks on that. Courtney, anything else that you want to talk about with this movie?
I feel like one thing that I really appreciated was the role of Melvin. You have this Mennonite community of women who are discussing a very difficult subject, and they all handle it in different ways. We get different portraits of, one turns to smoking and has panic attacks, and one is just unfiltered rage, and it's all understandable. Some turn to denial, and everybody handles it different, and yet they still make space in all the characters to include what I think is essentially a transgender male character in Melvin. And you have a group that is women who can't read, and they were never taught to write, and their experience of the outside world is vastly limited. They don't even have a map to know where they are, no internet. And yet they still found a wholesome and understandable way to describe a transgender male experience, where at least one of the women in this colony goes, no, this isn't me. This is going to be me now. And the women find different ways to handle that. All these characters have different reactions. And I feel like August Winter's performance as Melvin was one of my favorite parts of the film, even if it's more of a minor detail in the overall story.
I agree. And I think you're absolutely correct on the intention there. And there is even the moment where very specifically he's thankful for someone using his name. The idea of my taken name and naming me. And I think the movie handles that very, very well, and that character is vital to kind of our experience and our understanding of what is going on. There's so much empathy for everybody, right? Like there's so much empathy in this movie for what people are going through. There's even empathy for the men, which is really treacherous. That is like really treacherous place to go. But some of these characters talk about, what it means to love these men after everything they've done, right? And I think it's one of the hardest conversations the movie wanders into, but I think it does it beautifully. I think it handles all that stuff with the ability to go, here are the different narratives you can take, here are the different ways you can see this, and process and wrestle in your own mind with who you agree with and how you would approach a situation like forgiveness under such extreme circumstances and those kind of things.
I also feel it adds to the nuance because it's very easy, I feel like, in a movie like Women Talking, for you to try to divide this into a very black and white issue of the women are on this side and the men are on this side, and never the twine shall meet. But then you have this character like Melvin who has had a foot in both worlds. And the impact that adds to the nuance of this story is, to me, I think it stands out really well.
I also, my one last thing, and then if you guys have anything else you want to mention, we can go there too. But my one last thing is going to be, I was really impressed with how disinterested this movie was in orienting me to where it took place and when it took place. And I found that this movie, unless I missed something, which is obviously possible.
I mean, it tells you what year it takes place.
At the very beginning?
Yeah.
No.
2010 census.
Yeah, the 2010 census. The truck.
Well, I understand, but that's 20, 25 minutes into the movie. Like I'm just,
Right.
I'm saying, unless I'm wrong, which is fine, and then it'll invalidate my one last thing, but that's fine.
No, but
I don't think we know what year it is until we hear that the 2010 census is going on.
Oh, yeah.
And because of that, you are, and again, I'm also somebody who doesn't watch trailers, doesn't do pre-search. So, wow, I just coined that. I've never heard that before. Pre-search. Yeah, I don't do pre-search on movies.
Copyright 2022.
That's right. Yes, it belongs to me. Nobody's ever used that word before. So I don't do pre-search. I don't, watch trailers. So I go into movies pretty clean. And going into Women Talking, I didn't know when this took place. I didn't, this very much could be a Village situation, and it kind of is in that way, right? In fact, there are a lot that'd be a great double feature with The Village. There are definitely a lot of corresponding ideas, but I liked that. I liked that the movie was just follow the story. You'll learn what you need to learn. You'll know what you need to know.
Yeah.
And we'll get there, and so when I find out the 2010 census is going on, I'm going, oh, okay. So we're in a more modern day situation with a society that is choosing to live this way. And so then I'm going, okay, we're dealing with the idea, not casting aspersions on any particular group, but the idea of Mennonites. So the idea of this idea of we're choosing to live a simpler life from a previous time in a modern time. And the movie was able to kind of just bring me along where it wanted to bring me along. And I really liked that. So yeah, I thought that was good. What about you guys? You got one last thing?
It drops hints every now and then, like she takes out her dentures, and they're like modern dentures.
Right.
So, but it's stuff like that.
The first thing I remember thinking was somebody talked about walking a long distance to I don't know if they said 24-hour clinic or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. What's that? Yeah.
But you're right. It's not until the 2010 census we actually know.
Right.
You're right. Yeah.
I think so. I think that's right.
Well, and they reveal it so gradually. They're like that scene where they talk about her going to the mobile clinic. Like they take a gradual time to show you, oh, there are modern things here. Like they name dropped antibiotics, and I went, oh, okay, they have antibiotics, and they'd show the classroom, and there'd be like a modern clock on the wall, and I'd go, oh, okay, that's a modern clock. So it's again just adding more to the nuance and artistic view of this film.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. One last thing, Andrew.
There are two scenes in this movie. The first is when a 4-year-old girl comes into the barn loft and everybody sings her a lullaby. I actually had to step out of the theater during that scene. It was just too much. And then the other scene is whenever they're being taught the Southern Cross guidance scene. That scene's going to stick with me for the rest of my life. It shattered me to my core. So normally you'd be lucky to have a movie would be lucky to have one of those scenes, but this has two that are just. Do you think you can watch this movie again?
It's a valid question. There are those movies where you're supremely glad you saw them, but don't necessarily want to have to experience them again. I absolutely will watch this movie again. I know that for a fact, number one, because it's going to be nominated for Best Picture, and I do Oscars Weekend where we watch every single Best Picture that's a nomination, so I know I'll watch it then.
Yeah.
But I think I would willingly watch this movie again even after that, just for the deeper look into the nuance in the performances. And because you mentioned two scenes, I bet this movie has 5 or 6 scenes that
anybody could construe. But for me, those two scenes,
have that moment with. So yeah. One last thing, Courtney.
I guess I'll just answer Andrew's question of I honestly don't know if I'll watch it again. For me, it's very much I'm very glad I saw this.
Yeah.
This is a masterful work. It's not one that I want to experience again because it is just so brutal and so raw that when I think of movies that I watch over and over again, I go to your popcorn junkies like Twister and Pacific Rim, but this isn't one I'm going to have on repeat.
You know what it is from it's another great, I say great, terrible double feature, like to subject yourself to, in many ways, would be with Mass. There's a real Mass feeling to this movie as well, which again is people in a room talking about nuanced, horrible stuff. Actually, Mass has a lot of that same, like, different opinions in a very traumatic situation, having to have empathy and conversation with each other.
That's the Frank Kranz one, right, with Oscar or Jason Isaacs.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that one yet.
Oh, Andrew. Yeah. I think knowing your reaction to women talking, I think Mass is going to compete for number 35 or 36 or whatever. It really is that good. Mass is an incredible film in many of the same ways. But yeah, lots of good stuff. Yeah. But I'm not itching to watch Mass again.
Okay.
So yeah, it's in that same kind of category. Well, there you go. That is Women Talking. It should be in theaters near you, or at least maybe soon. Maybe it'll go wider at some point. All right, let's before we head on to the best ever challenge, just say thank you to our SIF Pop members. Thank you so much for hanging out with us and throwing a couple bucks our way every month. We love doing fun stuff for you guys. We had a conversation about the beginning of award season here in late November, early December. And Courtney and I are both now getting deluged with screeners that we have to watch. So we kind of talked about where we're at with that, and talked a little bit about how we see it, the Oscar race shaking down, award season shaking down, just kind of some of those pre thoughts. I mean, Oscars are still 4 months away, a third of the year away still.
Wow.
So
when you put it like that,
and yet it will be here before you know it.
3 months away. Sorry, a quarter of the year. Actually, 3 months away. Yes, and yet we'll be here before you know it. Anyways, we talked about all that stuff on the pre-show, which is available to our SIF Pop members at certain levels. So if you want to check that out, go to patreon.com/SIFPop. I did want to mention also during this that we are going to attempt as much as we can to institute a posting schedule with the content for our members. Now, if you are a SIF Pop member, you not only get the pre-shows in your own podcast feed, you get the main shows in that feed as well without ads. So if the ads annoy you, those kind of things, that is there as well. We are going to attempt to also make sure we get our SIF Pop members the show on Monday afternoon, and then it will go live for everybody else Tuesday morning. So you also should have the show a day early with the new posting schedule. So wanted to let you know that. You'll have the main show Monday afternoon. You should have the pre-show Tuesday morning when the main show launches publicly. So that is the posting schedule goals for our amazing SIF Pop members. Again, if you want to check it all out, it starts at $3 a month. That's at patreon.com/SIFPop. And thank you so much for keeping us going. We really do appreciate it. All right, let's get to our best ever challenge. We're going to go with an up-and-coming unknown director named Steven Spielberg. We're going to go with best ever.
Is he new?
I may not even. I know it was hard to find 5 movies that this guy has done, but yes. Spielberg movies.
But good things for this up-and-comer.
We will go from number 5 to number 1. We will go around Robin style. And if you have a movie that is higher in your list than someone else mentions it, let's say Andrew mentions a movie you have at number 2 at number 5, then you trump that. So basically you just say, we're going to wait to talk about that till it's in my list because I have it higher, and I will go Trump. I will play that sound effect. So, all right. Does it make sense? Courtney, kind of know what we're going with? We'll let you kick it off. What is your number 5 best ever Steven Spielberg movie?
I think number 5 goes to Raiders of the Lost Ark. Ooh. Obviously, this is kickoff for the Indiana Jones quintilogy.
It will be. It will be soon.
It will be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dial of Madness.
Dial of Destiny.
Dial of
You got to get that alliteration in there, Aaron.
It's such a horrible title. It's such a.
Yeah, it'll be 5 movies. Yeah, tell us about Raiders.
You know,
It's in my
I feel
honorable
like
mention.
I feel like Raiders again kicks off this original trilogy when you watch the films. There's just so much to it that sets what will be the course that these other movies chart. And I feel like when you look at just the original trilogy, people tend to think, "Oh, Last Crusade is the best," and people don't really Temple of Doom. But for me, I feel like Raiders is it's the loss or the new hope of the trilogy. You know, it's everything's new. You're kicking it off. You're getting to know Indy. It starts the trope of the boulder falling down and him running away from it. I that's why I put it at my number 5. It's a good beginning point for this legendary franchise.
Yes, I love Raiders. I believe we will have more from Indiana Jones from Andrew and I on our list at some point.
You'll have Kingdom of the Crystal Skull at the top, right?
Courtney, don't
Well, we don't want to spoil it. Yeah.
Come on, let us get
I was
there.
waiting for the sound effect, the Trump sound effect.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
All right, so
Aaron.
that is number 5 from Courtney. I'll go next. I have Saving Private Ryan
Aaron.
at number 5.
Hit it.
All right, you have it higher. I get it. Andrew, what do you have at number 5?
I have the 2005 film Munich.
Ooh, good choice.
Eric Bana, Daniel Craig, Ciarán Hinds, and Jeffrey Rush. I mean, this movie came out of nowhere for me. Right around the time I was just getting out of high school, I was in college. And my friends from high school were like, "Hey, come back to town. We're all going to go see the new Steven Spielberg movie." I had no idea he made a new movie. And I sat down to watch it, and I was expecting something that I'd seen from him before, like a big, grandiose film like Jurassic Park or, any of these movies that we're going to have on our list here. But when I sat down to watch Munich, I realized how just not Steven Spielberg this movie is. He's really stretching his abilities to show his range, and it's a tense, white knuckling movie the entire time. You never feel at ease at once during this movie. Also, the fact that it's based on actual events that happened during the Munich Olympics in '72, and how Israel responded after that. It's such it's an intimate movie because it feels very personal. Even if you're not Jewish and you're watching this movie, you're like, this can't stand. Something needs to happen about this. And the response is, it's amazing. This whole movie's amazing.
Yeah, Munich's really, really good. If it's gone by you, make sure you check it out.
Yeah.
Courtney, I think we are to your number 4.
Number 4, I have Catch Me If You Can.
Ooh, good choice.
So close to making my list.
There are just so many good scenes in this film.
It's
but
so
I feel
good.
like
It's my number 6, easy for sure.
Yeah.
It's so good.
right, and it shows that Steven Spielberg's not just the guy who's making memorable movies in the 70s. This is the guy who's making good films in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. I mean,
Yeah.
But my favorite scene by far, and really you cut this down to the chemistry between Tom Hanks and Leonardo DiCaprio, is when he walks out of the hotel bathroom and Tom Hanks thinks he's got him, and he does, but then he's able to bluff his way out with the wallet full of coupons, and he goes, "I just got to run this down to the car real quick." And gosh, it's such a good movie.
Easily, that's my favorite scene too. Easily.
Yeah, it's so
Never
good.
question the man in a striped suit.
No.
Yeah.
So good. Good choice. My number 4 is Minority Report. In at number 4.
Love this movie.
I love this
Spielberg's
movie.
made a few good movies, hasn't he?
He makes good films. It was funny. One of my kids, I think, we were watching the Fabelmans screener, and one of my kids said, Spielberg made, one good movie. Really, what has he done? And I started listing movies, and he went, "Okay, I was wrong."
Yeah.
He just
Well,
didn't
at
have-
least they admitted it.
What was
Yeah.
the one good
immediately.
movie?
In his mind, the one good Steven Spielberg movie, I think was Jurassic Park. I think that was the one he was thinking of. But yeah, Minority Report is among them. I love this movie. I think there's so many cool ideas and philosophical conundrums in this film, which is always going to be fun for me. So yeah, I love Minority Report. It is my number 4. Andrew, what is your number 4?
Probably Get Trumped. Schindler's List. Trump. Yep, there we go.
That's gonna get trumped. What is your number 3, Courtney?
I actually for number 3 I have the Amistad.
Ooh,
Interesting. Didn't even make my honorable mentions. Tell us what you love about Amistad.
You know, this was one of the movies that they showed us in high school. One of my civics or history classes, and it's the experience when your history class or whatever busts out a movie. You're going to watch it over 3 days, and I just remember at the end of class, because class is like 45 to 50 minutes in high school. I remember just remembering at the end of every class walking away going, man, I really want to see what happens next. And because we didn't have Netflix at the time, or I didn't have the ability to just go down to the video store and grab it, I had to wait until the next day. Come back to civics. Here's another piece of it. Leave. Wonder what's going to happen next. Come back. And it's just that model for this dramatic of a story and the legendary performances they have in it. I mean, we talk about brutal movies too.
Yeah.
This is obviously one of them, deals with the country's original sin. And I feel like, I don't think there's going to be a lot of people who would put it in their top 5, but for me, it's always left such a lasting impact because of its, historical themes and the brutal performances they have in it. I think it should be on at least everybody's watch list at least once.
Yes.
Fair.
100%.
All right. My number 3, I think would be next. This is where I have Schindler's List at number 3. Courtney, is it getting trumped, or we can talk about it now?
It is. You go ahead and talk about it now.
Yes. Let's talk about Schindler's List. Talk about a movie that's hard to watch twice. This is definitely one of them, but it is so impactful, so affecting. Ralph Fiennes is just mind-blowingly evil in this movie, and I can never forget his trying to figure out what grace is, where he's like, I pardon you, and then he kills him anyway. There's just so many things in this movie that really bring home everything that Steven Spielberg was trying to do. The choice to film it in black and white, was I think a good one in this case. We get on movies sometimes for unnecessarily going black and white as some sort of artistic choice, but here I think it is definitely a story choice, a creative choice. I
think it saves the audience too.
Yeah.
Because if you were to see the full color and the realization of what is going on, I think it would be that much more difficult to watch.
Sure. Yep. Andrew, you had it at 4, so go ahead and talk about it a little bit if you want.
Rewatchability, honestly. There's a difference between, when you say movie's not rewatchable, that doesn't mean it's not important. Quite the opposite, in fact. I think most of the movies that are not rewatchable are the ones that just hit that much harder. And but I think that, like you said, Ralph Fiennes is the epitome of evil. And Liam Neeson, obviously, I could have gotten one more scene is one of the most iconic scenes in film history.
Yep.
I actually just recently, within the last 2 years, rewatched Schindler's List, and it's just as difficult the second time to watch as it is first.
Yep. There you go. That's Schindler's List. Andrew, you're number 3.
Might get trumped. Actually, I think it has to get trumped. So just get ready with that button, Aaron, because this is where I have Last Crusade. Trump.
Indeed. All right, that brings us to our number 2s. Courtney, what do you got at number 2?
This is where I had Saving Private Ryan, actually.
Aaron, if you would do the honors.
Wow. All right. We'll have to wait one more time. My number 2 also might get trumped. My number 2 is Jurassic Park.
Same.
And
Okay.
All right. This just means we kind of agree on this upper echelon stuff.
Yeah.
Andrew, what is your number 2?
Jurassic Park.
we're getting good use out of that button today.
Yeah.
Everybody's number 2 is trumped. Courtney, tell us your number 1.
It's Jurassic Park.
It is Jurassic Park. So at number 1 for Courtney, at number 2 for Andrew and I. Courtney, talk about it.
You know, you talk about movies that define your childhood.
Yes.
As a 90s kid, Jurassic Park was the movie. I feel like despite the many sequels, most of which were highly disappointing, this set the tone for dinosaur movie. I mean, you can't, outside of Raptor Island and a handful of other truly terrible films, there's not a lot of movies out there that are going to deal with dinosaurs in such a manner. I mean, and it took the dinosaurs, made it a monster movie. You had great performances from your three central characters, plus the kids. There's just so much to love. I really love the use of practical effects over CGI. Any movie where heavily relying on CGI, I'm going to dock it points. But this was a movie where they took the time to invest in animatronics and put things that were actually there for the actors to react to. And I appreciated that. I wish more films did that today. You know, the fact that there are models of the velociraptors, of the T-Rex, of different things that they were looking at and reacting to. I don't think there's a single thing negative that I could say about this movie.
Yeah, I agree. It is a matter of tiny degrees between my number 1 and number 2. In fact, I think they're right next to each other on my top movies of all time list. I think they're, and they're both in my top 30 movies of all time, I think. So yeah, Jurassic Park is phenomenal. It's quintessential propulsive storytelling. Like it is, if you want to watch the epitome of a movie that doesn't let the audience go, it's Jurassic Park. And Spielberg owns the audience the entire time, has them right in the palm of his hands. And there are so many scenes in this movie that are just incredible tension vehicles. The moment you know the T-Rex is like, you know, not in its pen, from that moment, there's just this incredible tension. The kitchen scene is just the raptors in the kitchen scene is probably the one you would pick for the textbook. Like if you were putting together a class, like this is the scene to show how
to
that's
do tension.
Well, and if you think about it in many ways, it's kind of the opposite of Jaws. If you watch Jaws, you don't see the shark for too much of the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's well hidden for a good chunk of it.
Right.
Jurassic Park, you get to see the dinosaurs for the entire thing.
Right.
There's no, where are they at? They're right there in your face.
Yeah.
There's
Jurassic a little bit of where are they at, but it's used sparingly and really, really well.
I think Jurassic Park is what Spielberg can do with Jaws on a budget. You know?
Right.
Because the animatronic for Jaws kept breaking. Otherwise, the shark would have been everywhere in the movie.
You know, it is interesting. One of the things Spielberg's career, I think, proves, as does many directors' career, is that great movies are often a result of the obstacles. They are often a result of the barriers. And the creativity to operate within the barriers that you have is the genius of filmmaking in many ways. So yeah, I see that here as well. Andrew, some thoughts?
It's funny that you mentioned how close they are on your list because that is made me look up mine. So right now I have Jurassic Park at number 18 on my list of movies of all time, and Saving Private Ryan is 16. So, yeah, they're right there. It's funny because I have 4 movies, and this is what I want to bring up about Jurassic Park. I have 4 movies right next to each other that I feel changed the way movies were made. I think Jurassic Park changed the way movies are made. The Matrix changed the way movies are made. Saving Private Ryan changed the way movies are made, and Inception changed the way movies are made. And I have them all four right next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my biggest takeaway. And like Courtney, Jurassic Park defined my childhood. It set me on the path to who I am now.
Yeah, I was totally a child when Jurassic Park came out too.
Yeah,
I was,
93, what were you,
guys.
37,
Me too,
38?
No,
right, you
no.
dye the sides of your hair gray to be more like Doctor
Thank
Strange,
you, Courtney.
right?
See, finally somebody gets it.
Yeah.
Right.
Just a little bit of bleaching on the sides and on my goatee.
You know what's funny is he actually looks like what's his name? Grant, not Grant, but the guy. I'm ruining this bit. Who's the guy who owns the island? Hammond. I was gonna say when he doesn't dye his hair, he looks just like John Hammond.
Yes,
man, that bit could have been so funny.
Yeah, it really was. You were on the road to hilarity there, for sure.
If you just would have spared no expense.
Yes, you spared too many expenses, for sure. All right, let's move on to my number one. All our number ones should be pretty obvious. Mine is The Last Crusade. I love this movie. This movie defined my childhood. So that'll give you a sense of how much older I am. But yeah, just a little bit. And I think that's part of why I like Last Crusade more than Raiders, is because I was a little young when Raiders came out, and I watched Last Crusade first. It was my first Indiana Jones movie, and it's amazing. The Sean Connery stuff is so good. The father-son stuff, the River Phoenix stuff, like that back and forth is so amazing. And I think it has like some of the best puzzle-solving adventure stuff in the series as well, not to mention an incredible climax that involves, making a terrible hard decision and what shouldn't be a hard decision, but sometimes you get hypnotized by your precious. So yeah, there's a lot of amazing stuff going on here, and I love The Last Crusade. You had it at 3, Andrew, is that right?
Yeah.
So some thoughts on the Last Crusade, because we're both in the this is the best indie movie camp.
It is, yeah. I will say that you having this at number 1, I will say that you have chosen wisely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I may have chosen poorly. Totally agree on the climax of this movie and the 3 trials that he goes through, each one being better than the last. It's so fantastic. And then the actual Grail room itself, it's just such an iconic scene, like a set. And I think we've said this a trillion times whenever we talk about this movie, because we talk about it almost every week, it seems sometimes. But the dynamic between Connery and Ford is great, because that's how you humanize a character. You put a parental figure in front of them and watch them revert to who they were as a kid.
It's I'm going to consider this not spoilery, but I have to mention it because it's fresh in my brain. It's a movie that you haven't seen yet. But Inarritu did a movie called Bardo this year, and it is insane in some of the ways it visualizes things. But I wanted to mention it because you mentioned that, put a parental figure. There's a moment where he talks to his father, and the whole movie is kind of very oniric. It's very dreamlike, right? So there's this moment where he's talking to his father, and his character starts literally shrinking. He has the same adult head, but the body starts shrinking, and by the end of it, he is child-sized with his adult head. He looks like a bobblehead kind of a effect. But it's because Courtney is now looking at the screener she got for that. So there's that. It's this perfect visualization of that concept you're talking about. How we become children when we're around our parents. And anyhow, it made me think of that. So maybe we'll talk about Bardo later this year, but that scene seemed appropriate. So yeah, there you go. Thoughts on The Last Crusade, which brings us to your number 1, Andrew, which is
Jaws. No, Saving Private Ryan.
Saving Private Ryan. Before you start into this, I do want to mention, and Courtney, I'll explain this to you. Nick in the chat says, Saving Private Ryan. I wonder if they ever found her.
my
and
oh, Nick, why would you do this to me? All right, go ahead.
This is based on a best ever challenge we did when the category was best ever movies that have a female name in the title, and I chose Saving Private Ryan as one of my best ever movies because Ryan is a name that both genders have, and I got taken to task and told I had broken the rules, and it became a big thing. There was a vote and everything, and
you got vetoed.
I got vetoed, and I was not allowed to choose that. And I, to this day, think that is a fine answer for that category, and that Ryan is a woman's name.
Ryan is a woman's name, but it's not the name. Ryan in the movie is the woman.
It's not the best ever challenge of characters named Ryan in the movie that are men.
Yes, it is.
Or women. No, it isn't. It's the best ever movies with women's names in the title. And Ryan, you just said it's a woman's name, so there's a woman's name in the title, so that goes in the category.
No, it's women *S, women owning the name, so the person has to be a woman for it to work in the
person
title.
has to be, but not the character. There's no in
he's not a kid. He's not a woman either.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's not talking about the character. It's talking about women's names. Ryan is a woman's name. You just said it.
Yes, Ryan is a woman's name, but it's not the name of the character, so there is no
it's
Ryan
about
in
the character in the title.
There is no Ryan. There's no Ryan woman. Anyway,
so now you know what you missed, Courtney.
This movie is so good. I love this movie so much. Yeah, Spielberg, he has the ability to make some movies that just stick with you for the rest of your life, either in a good way or a completely depressing way. This is one of the depressing ways, just like Schindler's List. He somehow, I think the only person that I can think that comes close to making movies feel, or war movies feel as real and traumatic as Spielberg is probably Mel Gibson. But I think that Spielberg has a way of making these. I don't know if it's the way that he downgrades the color gradient to make it seem, more gritty, or if it's his, handheld cam, motion for a lot of the scenes, or it's the way that he can really the downtime in war, especially there's a scene where they're all trying to sleep in a church, and I forget his name now, but he played the medic in the movie, and he was telling the story about how his mom would come home early from work just to talk to him, and it's just him telling this story, and it's Giovanni Ribisi, by the way. It's one of the most painful. Just him telling it. When I was a kid, my mom used to come home early just to talk to me, and I pretended like I was asleep. And it's just the regret in his voice of I could die out here. And that's the last thing I'm going to think of is how I should have talked to my mom. It's so painful.
It's so good. It is, other than Jurassic Park, the only movie all three of us had on our list, I believe. I had it at number 5. Courtney, you had it at 3? 2. You had it at number 2, and Andrew, you had it at number 1. Courtney, do you have any additional thoughts?
I think to this day, even when you take into account Christopher Nolan's war movie that came out just a couple years ago, that the name is eluding
Dunkirk.
me right now. Yeah, even when you take into account Dunkirk, even today, I think Saving Private Ryan still contains the most warlike scene that gives you the best picture of what it was like captured on film. That's not an actual scene captured.
This year's All Quiet on the Western Front is giving it a run for its money, but
it is. But just again, going back to high school history class, when we get to World War II, the teacher busts out Saving Private Ryan and goes, "I'm only going to show you the first 15 minutes
Normandy.
of this film." Yeah. And
parents have to sign a waiver saying they can watch
parents
it.
have to sign a waiver, and just the class is silent, and the teacher can't get anybody to answer questions after that, because it's just that sets on you, and that's the whole movie. That, and That, and you know, the other thing that randomly juts out to me is Vin Diesel's in this movie. What?
He is in this movie.
Sure is.
Not for long, but he's in this movie.
Yep. And Amy Adams is in Catch Me If You Can for a hot second.
She is.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, Grace is on.
Yeah, Saving Private Ryan is amazing and easily one of the best movies ever to have a woman's name in it. So, it's
You realize he lives closer to you, right? He can.
That's true. He can come over and we can settle it. It's this and The Good Dinosaur. These are our biggest battles.
What two movies to have like be the biggest rivals? Saving Private Ryan, one of the most esteemed movies ever to grace any cinema ever.
Mm-hmm.
And The Good Dinosaur is the other movie that you and I
Yeah, we argued about for a while.
Yeah,
all right. For honorable mentions, I really just kind of picked ones I wanted to highlight because you really could just list
I didn't
most of
even
his
bother
movies.
making an honorable mention list.
Okay, fair enough. Courtney, did you list any honorable mentions or anything?
I had a really hard time not putting The Terminal on here.
It's a fair one again, and I like that choice. That's the same kind of things that I'll talk about with my honorable mentions, are just these movies that maybe not necessarily many people go to when they're talking about favorite Spielberg, but that we really, really like. I think it's wild and says something about the man's career that none of us had Jaws in our top 5. Like, often considered to be his best movie by most movie lovers, and none of us had it in the top 5. That's not a testament to Jaws, to any of us saying Jaws isn't that good. It's just a testament to this man has made so many movies that we love that it's hard to include them all.
Well, and I was telling, as I was putting this list together, again, talking to my wife about it, I'm getting ready to go on this podcast, got my top 5 Steven Spielberg movies, and she said, "You're not putting E.T. on there?"
Right. There's another one.
I know, but there's only 5. And the fact that nobody had E.T. when that is,
sure,
I feel like his quintessential movie that everybody thinks of, if it's not Jaws.
Yeah.
You know?
So the ones I wanted to bring up, Tintin, I like more than most people. I think Tintin is really, really good. And Lincoln is another one that
I was going to mention Lincoln.
Just kind of gets lost in the shuffle for some reason, but it's a really incredible film.
I mean,
now, a lot of that has to do with DDL.
He built a time machine and went back and got Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, Abraham Lincoln is actually in that movie. It's amazing.
It's crazy.
And then I really, really liked his version of West Side Story last year. I thought that was really, really good. And War of the Worlds is another one that I really, really enjoy. So.
I swear I thought you were going to have War of the Worlds on your list for 2 weeks in a row.
Nope,
I really did.
Just didn't quite make it. It wouldn't have even been my 6th because Catch Me If You Can would have been my 6th. So
War of the Worlds is, as a movie, I feel like was it 2002 is when that came out?
I thought it was like 5.
2005.
But,
yeah.
5. Okay. But I mean, War of the Worlds, if you didn't have Steven Spielberg behind it, that would have been an awful movie, I feel like.
he definitely made it good.
He pulls it through.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, let's finish off with some buried treasure, guys. What's that one thing in any area of culture you want to make sure people know about? Courtney, you're our guest, so you will finish us off. Andrew, kick us off. What's your buried treasure this week?
I am going to go with season 3 of The Orville.
Oh, okay.
It didn't start off all that strong. I really
agree.
didn't. And I was kind of hesitant. I'm like, oh no, are we going to get any kind of return to grace? The after like the first 3 episodes, it gets so good. Like, it's probably some of the best episodes of the show that they've ever done. What I will say is one of my big negatives for this season is they kind of lost the levity that the show had, like during the first season that I loved so much. Like, it was a great show, and it was a great Star Trek show knockoff, but it was also a great comedy.
Mm-hmm.
They've really tried to separate themselves from the comedy aspect, and it's just a great Star Trek knockoff now, which is kind of upsetting, but it's still a really good show. There's probably some of the best episodes of the entire show are in this 3rd season now.
I agree with everything you said, Andrew. Like, I have the exact same feelings. I didn't think I was going to enjoy it after the first couple episodes. I was like, oh man, this is such a bummer. I'm not really enjoying this. And then it just kind of hit a stride towards the end where I was like, oh, cool. The show that I love is back. The other part of the drama comedy thing, This season is, I think, more along the lines of what Seth MacFarlane wanted to do with this show. I think from the very beginning, he wanted it to be more dramatic, but was kind of pushed to say, no, you have to emphasize the comedy. You're Seth MacFarlane.
Yeah.
And so you can definitely feel that shift in the season, but I think it finishes really, really strong. So, and now we've got like Strange New Worlds, which kind of fills, this kind of classic Star Trek feel that we've been missing. And you've got Lower Decks that fills the Star Trek comedy thing. So like this show's place in the pop culture landscape isn't quite as needed now because there's actual Star Trek stuff that's doing some of the things that it did. So, but I'm glad it finished strong. So that's a good choice. Good choice. My buried treasure for this week is a documentary on Disney Plus, the National Geographic Channel on Disney Plus, called Fire of Love. Fire of Love is about two volcanologists. Is that how it's said? Something like that.
Yeah, like people who study volcanoes.
Yeah.
Yeah, volcanologists.
Or Vulcans,
Yeah, they're Vulcans.
It's the story of two Vulcans, Katya Kraft and Maurice Kraft. They were married and both loved volcanoes. And it is some of the most impressive, interesting volcano footage that you've seen was captured by them. And this documentary kind of goes into their passion for catching those things, how that passion turned to helping people, saving people's lives, giving people, figuring out warning systems for things like Everest, things like they divide volcanoes into two categories, the reds and the grays. Or maybe they say the oranges and the grays. The oranges aren't really that dangerous as long as you don't just like go swimming in the lava. The oranges are, for the most part, easier to control observation on. The grays are the dangerous ones because those are the ones that explode and create huge mudslides and ash falls and just, propel giant chunks of rock at hundreds miles, per hour. So they transitioned a lot from studying the oranges to studying the grays because those were the ones that were most dangerous. And if you don't know their story, I won't give any of the rest away, but it's definitely a story I think that is worth experiencing in this way. The documentary is the tone is a little slow for me. I know that's weird to say with a documentary, but I did find myself like, it really likes to linger. And there are times when I like it because the photos and the videos are beautiful. And then there are times where I'm like, let's just kind of move on to whatever the next chapter is. But it's really worth a watch. And it's on Disney Plus. So
did they go over Krakatoa at all?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I might have to check that
It
out.
covered like pretty much any big volcanic thing that's happened over the last 50 years. It goes over. So yeah, that's Fire of Love on Disney Plus. What do you want to talk about, Courtney?
So, because my day job is in news, obviously news takes up a lot of my brain. And this week, rail workers have obviously captured a lot of headlines. And so I wanted to talk about my favorite train movie that I don't feel like a lot of people talk about. And it is Unstoppable, which came out in 2010. And this is a movie that, again, I just feel like flies under the radar for so many people. But it's one I bust out at least once a year. Chris Pine, Denzel Washington, fantastic performances. Granted, the sequence and the events obviously very hyped up and fictionalized a bit from what actually happened here. But I think it's a movie that, again, if you're a popcorn junkie, it's definitely worth watching because they do such a good job at hyping it up and making it such an energetic flick.
You just said Aaron's favorite thing. He loves it when people bring up Unstoppable.
I love Unstoppable. Tony Scott, man, he doesn't miss. We talked about it with Jurassic Park. There's a way to make movies where you just understand what the audience is feeling and experiencing and just pull them along with every new moment and every new experience. And this is one of those movies. It's just so well paced and so entertaining. I love Unstoppable. So I'm always glad to talk about Unstoppable. So thank you for bringing it up.
Of course.
It's a good one.
I got something funny to bring up real quick.
Sure.
I was looking up the Fire of Love, and I'm like, I think I've heard of these people before. And then once I found out what happened or who they really were, I'm like, oh yeah, they should be in the Werner Herzog documentary Into the Inferno. They are.
They are. Yes.
Yeah,
They definitely are. Unstoppable's great. If you're looking to watch it, I believe you can rent it on the streaming services and find it there. I don't think it's streaming free anywhere currently, but
yeah, that's the one thing that always frustrates me is I'll try to find it, and I'm like, if you subscribe to Hulu and HBO Max and Netflix and Disney Plus, I feel like you should have every movie ever, but you don't. There's ones that fall through the
frustrating.
cracks.
It is one of the most frustrating things about the streaming era so far is that the content just isn't all there. Like and as a movie lover, it's just like, why? If you isn't part of the only company that's doing it really is Disney. Disney's the only one that's like, here's all of our stuff. Everybody else is like, here's some of our stuff. This month, this stuff's going away, and this stuff is coming. And it's just like, why? Just put it all on there. What are we doing here?
It always happens to me with Unstoppable and with The Last Unicorn. I can never find that on any streaming service either. And anytime I want to bust it out, I gotta go rent it from Amazon. I should just get a physical copy. I know.
Yes.
I haven't thought about The Last Unicorn since I was a kid. I love that movie growing up.
Bonus buried treasure, The Last Unicorn. Well, there you go. Unstoppable is available for rent on the streaming services or on like Apple and Google and wherever you buy your movies. Fire of Love is on Disney Plus, and the Orville new season is on Hulu if you want to check that out. Well, we did it, guys.
Yeah, we did.
Managed to do a podcast. Congratulations. The podcast lava was flowing, and we managed to survive. So congratulations to all of us. Thanks so much for joining us today for Sif Pop. It is part of the Studio DNA Podcast Network. You can find out more about other shows on the network at studiodna.media or by searching Studio DNA in your podcast player. Huge thanks to Andrew for hanging out again today.
Thank you, buddy. I got to kill a fly in this room.
You definitely have a fly flying around.
Yeah.
Big thanks to producer Phil for producing the audio and video show.
Thanks, man.
Much love to Courtney Lanning for coming by this week.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Hope you had fun.
Courtney, it was great to have you on the show. Where can people find you? What do you want to promote? Tell people where to go find Courtney Lanning stuff.
I've got a couple books and my movie reviews and everything. You can find them all at CourtneyLanning.com.
What are the books about?
So they are actually set down in the Ozarks. They're just a couple of YA fantasy books that I've set right in Northwest Arkansas, where I spent a lot of my time in life.
There you go.
Yeah, you go. Really just a hop, skip, and jump away from us.
Yep. That is at CourtneyLanning.com. 2 L's in Lanning. Courtney with a C, Lanning.com if you want to check that out. Thank you to our Sif Pop members for being amazing. You make the magic happen. Starts at $3 a month. You can check out all the details at patreon.com/SifPop. Really appreciate you guys. There's a lot of ways to connect with the podcast. You can leave a comment, a rating, or a review at Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen. And I saw a couple people post their Spotify, whatever Spotify does, where it has the podcast that you listen to. Thank you for doing that. That's really, really cool. And if you want to email us, you can email us at feedback@sifpop.com. And finally, if you're having a good time, your movie-loving friends will probably like the show too, so make sure you let them know about it, and that listening is much easier than making an exciting movie with terrible horizon placement. We will be back next week with Pinocchio and more. So we will see you next week to chat a little bit about Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio next week. So
it can't be worse. It can't be worse.
It cannot. All right, catch you next week, guys.
Bye.
To the video chat, thanks for hanging out with us. Love seeing you guys around. And thanks, Nick, for throwing the the grenade into the conversation with the Saving Private Ryan. I do want to mention, Nick says also not super popular, but I loved Ready Player One. I actually kind of enjoy Ready Player One as well.
I liked it so much better than the book.
And Jay Bourgeois says BFG is the modern Spielberg that I liked more than most people. I also enjoyed that one. I literally don't know that there's a Spielberg that I don't like.
Oh, really? That's easy.
Yeah.
So Lost World, maybe?
Lost World, Jurassic Park would probably be
War
Jurassic Park,
Horse.
The Lost World. War Horse is fine. It's
Oh,
not. I mean, it's
that's
not
such
terrible.
a stupid movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah, at least everything's in
Kingdom
the
of
just
the
okay.
Crystal Skull.
Oh, I guess that was him. Yep, you caught me. You got me. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull's bad.
Hopefully soon, not Destiny of Dial or Dial of Destiny.
Destiny of
Yeah.
Dial. Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. We'll check you on the next one. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.